And here we are back with another edition of Cuyahoga's Most Wanted. These are fugitives. They have active warrants. They are on our streets. You can help clean up the streets by calling in a tip, maybe getting on a website, putting in a tip through Cuyahoga's Most Wanted or Crime Stoppers of Cuyahoga County to clean up our streets just a bit. As we always do, we're going to welcome in Detective Red Dyer with the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department. Red, how are you today? It's good to have you back.
I'm excellent, Dan. Good to be back.
Hey, we know this is a program that works. We have seen multiple suspects that we have featured here end up getting picked up. We've got something like a 33% effective rate, meaning if we show you 3 suspects, one of those more than likely is going to get caught in the coming weeks because of a tip from you, the people who are watching. We have a new set of fugitives who are out there. Let's get started, Red. James McGinty Jr., walk us through the case.
Okay, Dan. Well, with James McGinty Jr., as with most weeks, I feel it's important to mention people who are sex offenders who may be out in the community right now. In 2009, James McGinty pled guilty to rape. And as part of that agreement, as we've discussed in the past, he's required to register as a Tier 3 sex offender with the Sheriff's Department. According to the sex offender registry, the victim was disturbingly 8 years old, only 8 years old at the time this offense occurred. He is approximately 5'10" and 161 pounds. And I should mention, he also has outstanding warrants with Lakewood for contempt of court, as well as the Adult Parole Authority. So he is considered a violator at large. He has identifying tattoos on his left leg of a skull and a skull on his right arm. He was last known to be staying in the 1300 block of Ansel Road in Cleveland.
And especially when you give us those tattoos, sometimes that's what's needed. Maybe he's cut his hair, or maybe he's dyed his hair, but if there's an identifying tattoo like a noticeable skull on the arm, that could be enough to get somebody to call in a tip. Our next case, an Efren Morales. What do we know?
Well, Dan, what we know is that this is actually a case that stems from the Cleveland Animal Protective League. I feel like it was important to mention because I'm sure the community, much like myself, are animal lovers. It's alleged that Mr. Morales actually caused serious physical harm to a companion animal. And he actually has a criminal history dating back with the Sheriff's Department to 2010. In 2019, for instance, he pled guilty to grand theft, where the indictment states that he stole the victim's 2013 Chevy Malibu. A warrant was issued for his arrest in March of 2022 for this most recent case. And he's approximately 5'8" and 200 pounds. He also has an active warrant with Strongsville Police Department for failure to appear. He was last known to be staying in the 3100 block of West 32nd Street in Cleveland.
Red, much like you, I'm assuming you've never had a warrant out for your arrest. I have not either. I can't imagine.
I have not.
Yeah, can't imagine how nervous these individuals are. You know, at any point, if somebody spots you, if you ever get pulled over, you've got these active warrants. And if this next case, when we start talking about that, it's bad enough to have one warrant. Maybe you're wanted by 2 agencies. Maybe you have 3 police departments who are looking for you. This next case, an extreme amount of warrants looking for William Caldero. Walk us through it.
Yes, sir. And like you said, Dan, this is actually a pattern we do see with some wanted individuals, multiple warrants. In 2013, William Caldero pled guilty to sexual battery, and he's required to register with the county, just as Mr. McGinty is. According to the Sex Offender Registration Unit, he's not been cooperative in keeping up to date with his address. He actually has a history of not updating his address due to a 2015 plea to failing to register with us. He has a criminal history with us dating back to the early 1990s, when I was just a child, with various other charges. He's 6'2" and 226 pounds, and like you mentioned, he has outstanding warrants with, to name a few, Brook Park, Fairview, North Ridgeville for charges such as theft, forgery, passing bad checks. He's somebody we definitely want to get off of the streets. He was last known to be staying in the 27,000 block of Caroline Circle in Westlake.
And let's remind our viewers why it's so important for sex offenders to keep up to date with their registry. Not just so that if you live in Westlake and you want to do a search to make sure your children are safe where there are sex offenders living, but also if there's another case, perhaps someone is a victim of a new sexual crime, investigators can use that registry and start looking in the area at past offenders and at least have a jumping off point to start questioning individuals who have been involved in that type of crime in the past. Red, we remind everybody every week that to call in a tip, you are not going to be a snitch. You don't have to worry about snitches get stitches, because walk us through the process of what happens when somebody calls in and wants to stay anonymous.
Well, keep in mind, Dan, as I say every week, we don't have caller ID. We don't record your phone call. We don't have your phone number or any identifying information such as your name. We reference everything through an anonymous tip number. So no information is ever exchanged, whether you call in, whether you go to crimestoppers.com, or whether you use our crime portal app.
And we always remind people that you're given sort of an ID number, that if you want to check and see if your tip led to an arrest, if you are eligible for that reward and remind you it is up to a $5,000 reward, you use that tip number. That way your name is not associated with the case. You're not going to be called into court to testify because you called in a tip that said, hey, I saw that guy. He was at such and such a place. I know he works at such and such a place and gets paid under the table. Speaking of reward, Red, give us your tagline.
Crime doesn't pay, Dan. Crime Stoppers does.
Absolutely it does. You can be eligible for that reward simply by helping to clean up our streets. These are fugitives. They are innocent until proven guilty, but in most cases when they get in front of a judge, it's an entirely different tune. Detective Red Dyer with the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department, I want to thank you for joining us yet again this week. Appreciate it, Red.
Thank you, Dan.
All right, take care. Again, we do this every week, and it's incredibly successful to help clean up our streets. It's the least we can do to help out Crime Stoppers of Cuyahoga County and get some of these fugitives back in front of a judge. If we have any other breaking news, we're going to bring it to you here on our digital platforms. Remember, we have 3.5 hours of news starting at 3 o'clock. A lot of news coming from the East Palestine train derailment. Some testimony, some Senate testimony today in Washington, D.C. Our Brian Duffy is in our nation's capital, and we'll have the very latest when we start our news at 3 o'clock. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Have a good afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV apps and follow us on social media at Cleveland 19 News.
Excellent, gentlemen. Appreciate the time. We'll see you
Good job,
next
Dan.
week.
All right, we'll see you next week, Dan. Thank
All
you.
right, take care, guys.